Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We were giving a few moments just to try to get quorum, but to be mindful of everyone's time, we're going to go ahead and proceed today. Just keeping in mind, so a meeting without a quorum of the membership present does not constitute a meeting in which business can be conducted. Motions will not be recorded. However, we will still present the information that's on our agenda, so you have that information in your folder. We'll still review the slide deck that's also in your folder. And then, of course, anything outlined on the agenda, we can open up for discussion among our members, and then public comments will be accepted.
All right, we're going to do roll call this morning. Good morning. Melissa Baham. Here. Rebecca Beard. Dr. Jeremy Bell. Leslie Calloway. Proxy. Thank you. Aaron Downing. Dr. Sally Ross Gaglion. Rebecca Huff. Here. Brandy Huling. Janae Clark Jackson. Carolyn Jurish. Here. Ashley McReynolds. Angela Miles. Dr. Donna Reno. Julia Tanner. Michael Thompson. Renata Washington. Jessica White. Alveda Willis.
Washington, okay. We're just counting. I believe we now have a quorum. Okay, perfect. That's great timing, Ms. Washington. Good morning. Well, again, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I am Lauren Wells, the Executive Director of the Division of Diverse Learners, and it is certainly a pleasure to see everyone today. I know how chaotic this time of the year can be, especially with holidays coming up, so appreciate everyone taking the time to join us for our discussions. So before we begin, just as a reminder to all of our members and a reminder to myself as well, and anyone making a public comment, this meeting is being live streamed. And also make sure we're talking directly into the microphone. Also, if there are guests here today that wish to offer a public comment, you can fill out the public comment cards that are over on that side table, so those blue comment cards, and then turn in the card to our staff. Of course, comments will be heard for each agenda item, so anyone wishing to offer multiple comments should fill out a card for each item. Also considering that a person may only comment once per agenda item, and then the order of the comments is left up to us. So provide efficient use of our time. We might alter the amount of time, but I don't think we'll need to do any of that today. So moving right into our agenda, let's try again. There we go. The first item on our agenda is simply a review of the report from our last SEAP meeting. So this meeting was held September the 11th. I will go ahead and present this information to you. So if you'll take a moment, look in your folders, you should all have access to that report. So looking at the report, does anyone have any questions on the minutes or what was discussed? Okay. So no discussion around the report. Do we have any public comments? Okay. So seeing and hearing no discussion or public comments, we will now move on to our first agenda item under new business. So our first item here, this is a K through 12 instructional materials review, also known as IMR. This is a rubric for dyslexia. So this is a high quality instructional materials, also thinking of HQIM, and a supplemental list. We did have a member of our literacy team who's unfortunately sick today, so I'm going to do my best to present this information on her behalf. I wanted to take a moment. So we have an instructional materials evaluation tool here. We'll pass these around. So as Christine's passing these around, really wanted to just kind of dive into what this even is that we're discussing this morning. So thinking about the purpose here, the purpose of K through 12 dyslexia HQIM rubric, this is really going to establish some consistent evidence-based criteria for reviewing instructional materials that are specific to serving our diverse learners with dyslexia and other related reading difficulties. So this rubric, this is going to ensure some alignment with our literacy vision here at the department. Also thinking about the requirements that are outlined within Bulletin 1903, that Louisiana Handbook for Students with Dyslexia. So Christine just passed out copies of the current 3 through 8 rubric. This is just for your reference. And what we're first going to do is set a baseline for quality to review materials for students with dyslexia based on the criteria that's previously established with this 3 through 8 foundational skills rubric. So the materials for students with dyslexia, they first must meet our Tier 1 expectations from that rubric that's in front of you. So really considering those Tier 1 expectations. And then any materials that demonstrate a full alignment to that criteria will then advance to a dyslexia-specific review. So again, really keeping in mind the population of students that we are wanting to support here, what materials look like for their specific reading needs. So again, first considering that criteria that's in the rubric in front of you. So if an individual, a vendor, meets that specific criterion, they can then move on to a second phase of this IMR, that instructional materials review process. So if that vendor moves on to that IMR process, the materials presented will then be reviewed using very specific dyslexia criteria. So that criteria is really going to focus on some specialized features that we've deemed essential for a student with dyslexia and their need around intervention. So those criterion will include a diagnostic prescriptive design, also multi-sensory engagement, so thinking about visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile learning. And then during that second phase of this process, for a dyslexia-specific intervention program, we need very clear parameters around fidelity. Also needing to establish training requirements. So who might be providing this intervention to the student? And then of course, developing progress monitoring tools. So what intervention looks like for these students, how we are tracking it, true progress monitoring tools there. So then under this review, any materials that meet criteria within both phases of that dyslexia IMR review. So again, both phases, so considering the criterion I just mentioned around dyslexia, again, diagnostic prescriptive design, a multi-sensory approach, and then the clear fidelity parameters, training requirements, and progress monitoring. That IMR review can indicate Tier 1, and it exemplifies the quality. So it would then move on and be kind of the gold star, the gold standard there for what it would mean to support a student for dyslexia with high quality instructional materials. And then you can just see here on this slide really what this supplemental list is looking at. So again, making sure alignment occurs with Bulletin 1903. making sure our districts have clear guidance. We often receive and field questions around what it means to support a student with dyslexia, specific to intervention, specific to supports or resources currently available. So this guidance and this supplemental list would really provide that needed guidance to our districts to make sure that we are implementing some suitable dyslexia intervention programs for our students. So at this time, I will take any member discussion.
We have any questions or comments from the panel?
Good morning.
Hi, Dejanay. Good morning.
I'm so excited to see this. This is a long time coming. I will admit, I wish I had a little more time to dig into this to provide some really explicit feedback. But just at a cursory glance, the third non-negotiable in the criteria, I just want to give kudos to the required section about the material support that highlights the level of interaction between student and teacher. I will be led to believe that that would be a strong encouragement of non-computer-based programming for this supplemental materials list. And so I'm really happy to see that in there. What I don't see, and I'm curious as to how that fits within the criteria rubric, is the mention of language and vocabulary is absent from this, and I'm curious as to, is it in there? Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Good
Strike
catch.
that last comment.
That's okay. No, that's a good flag.
But I would stress using language in as the language to use in there, because it is a language-based area to address and not just vocabulary instruction.
Okay. Thank you, Dejanay.
And maybe just even on 5B, understanding of text and language. Maybe just adding some simple verbiage to make sure that that is a focus as well.
So my understanding is this is the current tool that's used to evaluate. We are now looking for kind of a step two to go even further specific to dyslexia. So these comments around the use of language, what you just referenced, or around vocabulary as well, is what we can really provide to make sure we have that dyslexia specific criteria. So consider this as like our baseline. And then developing additional criterion specific to dyslexia. So all currently materials currently go through the process of what you see in front of you, right? So the purpose of what we're trying to establish is to go even a step further to establish that dyslexia specific criterion around the multisensory approach, thinking about language, thinking about vocabulary usage, thinking about training requirements, progress monitoring. So we can certainly, Christine, to your point, with our dyslexia-specific criterion, you identified, I think it was item 5, so thinking about demonstrating understanding of text. So within our dyslexia-specific criterion, we can really go a step further, be very clear of looking at text and language.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Lauren? I'm glad you said that. So what we have in front of us is what's currently used for Tier 1 IMR criteria, and so we are going to use this. They have to meet this requirement. The dyslexia-specific supplemental rubric has not been developed yet.
Correct. And
Okay.
I'm glad you brought that up. So our guru, Sharon Nikes, is here to really walk us through the current tool is what all Tier 1 must currently meet. So what's in front of you is that IMR evaluation tool. Yeah,
Thank
go
you,
ahead,
Dr.
Sharon.
Wells. Sharon Case. I lead up academic content division here at the department, and my division runs the instruction materials review process. So the current rubric you have in front of you is our current tool for our 3-8 reading intervention supplemental programs. We also have a review tool, think about it, for K-12 core ELA. So this is our one supplemental that we review for right now. So when we think about the materials we want in front of students to support with dyslexia, we want those materials to meet the requirements of this intervention tool and more. So we're currently developing what those indicators of superior quality to meet those needs of those dyslexic students would be in addition to this. But this would be that first gateway, if you want to think about it that way. We're not going to review anything for dyslexia if it doesn't meet these requirements. When it gets tier 1 on this rubric, then we'll talk about the multisensory and the other comments that y'all added in addition to this, and then it can be approved for intervention and supporting students with dyslexia.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Sharon.
Once that's been developed, will that then be brought back to the panel for review and comment?
Yeah, that's our goal. We're going to go to the Literacy Commission and SEAP. We also do, when we create review tools, share them with publishers ahead of time. Because if you think about they're making these materials, they want to ensure they're meeting our bar for quality. They need to make some adjustments or things like that. We'll share it on our quarterly publishers call to make sure that they're aware before we do the call for materials.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the panel? Any public comment?
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate that insight. So at this time, can we get a motion for the recommendation of this K through 12 Instructional Materials Review, or IMR, rubric for dyslexia around HQIM, this supplemental list that we are referencing?
Is the motion to create the HQIM for dyslexia supplemental list? Because this isn't it, right? So
Correct. Yes, the motion would be to continue forward with the creation of this supplemental list specific to dyslexia criteria.
Okay, I move.
Thank you, Dejanay. Autumn? You?
So that brings us to the next section, which would be dyslexia core assessment request for applications, so RFA. Can I have a motion to hear? Motion. Second? Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Wells?
Yes, thank you. Okay. So, moving on to our second item under new business. This item is the Dyslexia Core Assessment for Applications, also known as an RFA. I will present that information for your consideration. So, as you are likely aware, this item is specific to Act 517 of the 2024 regular legislative session. And this act indicated that if a student is at risk for dyslexia, according to a kindergarten or other grade level screener, then a parent or a legal guardian can request a core assessment for dyslexia. So the act does indicate that this core assessment will not be based on a single test score or specific number of characteristics. And then it also goes on to include the specifications around what the core assessment should include. So looking at test of language, particularly phonemic awareness, real words, oral reading fluency, as well as intellectual ability. Also looking at academic performances, and then an interview with that student's parent or legal guardian. So based on this act, a parent or a guardian may select that either their school system, so that local education agency or LEA, or a vendor or an approved professional by the department can administer this core assessment. So the information that you see here on the slide is based on this act. And here at the department, we developed the RFA process, or that request for applications. So if vendors or professionals are interested in becoming an individual who provides this core assessment, they would go through this RFA process. So it's linked here. It's also on our website. Basically, that RFA, it's going to indicate that the vendor can give that core assessment, and then really thinking about a dyslexia core assessment and who the vendor or professional it's going to be provided by. So thinking about the qualifications that are set forth, and it really outlines within this RFA who can give that core assessment. Qualifications that are set forth by the assessment publisher must be trained in administering the assessment. And these individuals can include a licensed psychologist, a certified school psychologist, a licensed speech language pathologist, educational diagnostician, clinical psychologist, or a certified academic language therapist. And then, of course, the assessment publishers are those who have determined the professionals that need to be trained to interpret these assessments. So that RFA that's listed again here on the slide and in our website really goes over those parameters for becoming a vendor to give a core assessment. So we simply wanted to make you aware of this process. This, again, was legislative act. And so we've really developed and trying to kind of hone in on dyslexia. And I think it really is a good conversation as we've thought about our previous agenda item around dyslexia intervention. Now what it means to give this core assessment if that parent or legal guardian requests it. I also wanted to make you aware that we are launching a platform in January. So the RFA is really the first step with this process. First, identifying who might be interested in giving this core assessment. The second step is around that legislative act, which indicates reimbursement. And so we are launching a platform that's set to be available in January, so opening this winter, that will really go over the steps for how a vendor applies for reimbursement of this core assessment. So as January is quickly approaching, as this RFA is already online, we wanted to just bring you this item really for awareness. As you're bringing it back to your stakeholders, bringing it back to your districts, making your teams aware, because we know we often field a lot of questions around dyslexia and differing support needs. And so we think this really is a step in the right direction around where we're looking at intervention, right? What it means to have that dyslexia-specific criterion for intervention. And then this goes a second step, what it means to have a diagnosis around dyslexia with that core assessment. So again, wanted to bring this to you for awareness. You can see again the information here on the slide. But at this time, I'll open it up for any member discussion specific to our dyslexia core assessment RFA.
Okay, I guess I'll speak for the questions that the special ed directors have, I think. So whenever this came out, we purchased the test of dyslexia. And that's the one that our district has chosen to utilize. So when this platform opens, are we as a district having to apply as a vendor as well? And then we also apply for reimbursement?
Yes, correct.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, this is something that I've had concern with from the beginning when LEAs were named in this opportunity to do the core assessment and thereby receiving reimbursement. Has there been conversation around sort of this dual dipping of responsibilities? Because the core assessment essentially is what pupil appraisal is doing and should be doing at the school level to assess students. As just mentioned, if a district decides to purchase the TOD to assess their students for at-risk, then that's something districts are already doing. My concern is, how is this different from their responsibilities? And if this still creates this backlog of opportunities for students to be assessed, then we're really not addressing the issue with having parents having the option of going to vendors for assessment. I know I've discussed this previously. I'm just concerned about that. And then you have Medicaid billing and all the things that happen at the school level that seems to be cycled into this as well.
Right.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So in our district, the requests that we get whenever it comes to the test of dyslexia or any, they want to be screened. And so these are coming mainly from parents or from teachers. And that's their only concern. And so then from there, like the act states, you can't just look at one assessment. So it kind of opens the door to see if there are any other areas of concern. And we're going through the SBLC process. So there are steps in place. And then as far as reimbursement, when we purchased it, and I mean, because we knew we had to do it. So if LDOE is going to reimburse us, that's great, because then we can use those funds for other things. And we don't bill Medicaid for assessments in our district. I don't know if other districts do, but we don't.
So just a point, I think, to further this, maybe clarifying, is there a list of approved assessments currently for districts to use? And then two, is there a list of vendors that parents can choose from or districts can choose from?
No. We've asked, but I've not received a list. I don't know if I've asked.
Okay. Would that be helpful?
A vendor doesn't exist. That's what this was meant to provide. Sorry, y'all, this is dead.
There it goes.
Oh, there it is. Short in it. There we go. I'm not gonna move it. That's what the core assessment was made to provide a list of vendors to alleviate the pressure of districts to be able to do the assessment. And I can definitely see where Medicaid is not billed for assessments, but so it's mainly like your SLP work and those sort of things that get billed for Medicaid in the district. The assessment reimbursement, though, is per assessment, per student. So it's not like you're reimbursed just for the one-time purchase of the assessment. So again, my concern is just that students are already going through the SBLC process. Whether they have a concern and the parent has a concern or teacher has a concern for dyslexia versus any other reading challenges, that will still be brought to the SBLC. So I think we can't go back and change well, it's not in law, I think it's in our policy, but just providing some guidance, I think is going to be absolutely necessary. I've had several conversations with school psychs, with pupil appraisal teams. Everyone wants to know how this is going to roll out. What does this look like in practice? And at the end of the day, when parents go out to get a core assessment, they still have to bring those results back to the SBLC and pupil appraisal, and it starts that cycle of review and acceptance again. So it's not like we're sort of fast tracking services.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that, Dejanay. We certainly need to be very clear with our guidance. We've worked with the comms team to develop a communication plan specific for all of our stakeholders. That's very parent-facing because we want them to be aware of this process, but need some additional work, not just for our parents, but as you're mentioning, our districts, right? It looks like two districts right here y'all are discussing and have differing interpretations of it just right here around this table. So that's very helpful.
Any other questions or comments from the panel?
I have a question about the RFA process. Is this for individuals or is it for companies, or like who can apply to be a vendor?
Yeah, so that RFA really identifies the parameters around what it means to give a core assessment, what that core assessment should consist of. And so it really breaks down, and it could be an individual, it could be a private practice, a vendor. So it goes through the steps as to what we're looking for there to be eligible to give that core assessment.
Any other question or comments from the panel? Public comment? Dr. Catherine Hart?
Catherine Hart. I'm a parent. I just wanted to bring up that our students with vision loss, our students with CVI, our students with hearing loss and auditory processing disorder are also failing DIBELS. And we need to make sure these vendors, especially since you're going to be reimbursing them, are also able to serve students with vision and hearing loss, as our students can have dyslexia as well. I would also suggest that if the student is moved into needing to be screened for dyslexia, that they also be screened for cortical visual impairment. While I believe specific learning disability does require that you rule out a vision or hearing loss, what's happening is the school nurse is performing an acuity test, which does not rule out cortical visual impairment. We are going to start catching those kids based on developmental history, but there's still a group of kids that may not have that developmental history and may have characteristics of dyslexia. There is a pretty easy app called the Austin Assessment that is now valid for screening CVI that districts could use. It's very quick. You don't need a teacher for the visually impaired to do it. And then that can tell you what kids also need evaluation for a teacher for the visually impaired, who can then collaborate with whoever's doing your dyslexia testing as well, because they can tell them what areas of that test need to be adapted, what areas of that test may not be valid.
Okay, thank you. You said Austin assessment?
The Austin Assessment, it came out of New Zealand, and CVI Scotland has been promoting it quite a bit.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hart. We appreciate that. Are there any additional public comments? Okay. At this time, can we get a motion for the continued recommendation of this RFA, really going forward with the process, looking at the platform? Thank you, Dejanay. Is there a second? Thank you. Okay. So we are moving on to our other agenda items now. These include our informational reports. So our first informational report really encompasses some work that falls under the Division of Diverse Learners. So thinking about our division, we support English learners, we support students with disabilities, but we also support our gifted and talented learners, or those that have been twice identified. So the gifted and talented work group that we're going to present to you, this will be presented by Carolyn Wilkinson. I think many of you have had the opportunity to meet Carolyn, but she serves on our Division of Diverse Learners.
Hi. Good morning. I'm Carolyn Wilkinson. I serve as the Gifted and Talented Coordinator, but also as an educational consultant that provides support to all diverse learners initiatives. We are incredibly excited to put together a gifted and talented work group with 13 very passionate stakeholders from across the state. I wanted to tell you a little bit about where they're coming from regionally. We have representation from Monroe City Schools, Calcasieu, EBR, St. Charles, St. Tammany, Vernon, Livingston, St. Tammany, St. Mary, and Lafayette. So a true representation of our whole state. And it consists of a parent. Actually, I was a principal, and this is the parent of the most academically gifted child that I ever serviced, and the most challenging to get this child what they needed. So this is who I wanted to come to the table. It's the dad of that child. Teachers, both gifted teachers and talented, music, theater, art, gifted and talented coordinators, which sometimes there's a gifted coordinator in a district, sometimes a talented, sometimes it's a SPED rep that serves in all capacities. In fact, in Vernon, that person is the SPED rep, the GT coordinator, and federal funds. I don't know how she keeps it all together. And also we wanted PA representation because we know that that is such a big piece of identification. And we convened on October 16th prior to coming to the table, I asked them to send me priorities, their priorities for positively impacting gifted and talented programming across the state. What could we get behind as the department to help? And so they very passionately sometimes sent me more than two. Like they couldn't always keep it to two, but I get it. And so a pattern emerged. Let me do this. Around these 5 areas, this is what came out of the words they sent me. And so I constructed 2 to 3 guiding questions in each of these categories. The focus areas were around identification and access, program funding, staffing and oversight, teacher pipeline and professional learning, screening instruments and evaluation updates, student well-being and communication. I lobbed out like the first guiding question, and I think that there was a breath taken in the room like an hour and a half later. Like they're just so passionate and excited to come to the table. So from that work, we kind of created focus areas that we want to continue the work around. And these are the 5 areas. I said we had to limit it to 3, and then personally, I made it 5 after going through all of the comments. That is to identify process recommendations for gifted and talented programs, review policy language for suggestions of clarity and alignment, develop a resource bank with tools and exemplars, explore pathways to recruit and support gifted and talented educators, and examine methods to build stronger communication and to share practices statewide. So exciting times. I recently was able to meet with GT coordinators in Luling in November and further put these focus areas out there and receive a Google form of feedback from them. So this is where we are. I'm excited. The work is important.
Okay. Well, thank you for that overview, Carolyn. I know there's a lot of passionate folks across our state, so excited to bring some of these focus areas to you. At this time, do we have any member discussion?
I just have one. Oh, it is working even though the light's not on. I appreciate all of this. This is an area that this group has never sort of looked at before, at least from the years I've been coming. Is there any reason why there was only one parent on the group? And is there like an option to add additional parents to the group? Did work with this, but are like, okay.
That maybe there's a coordinator, teacher,
Mhm. Okay.
and then I wanted live representation, but also
Mhm. Okay. Just wondering. Thanks.
I have a
Thank you,
question.
Ashley. Yeah, no
Can
problem.
kind of speak to the resource bank with tools and exemplars that
Carolyn, you speaking to your mic. Yeah.
okay. What we want to do is have things available on our website that are useful across the state. A lot of things were in paper when I like paper form and so we're now dropping things into like a Google Drive and embedding it, but if there are resources that could be useful to districts, I want to go through the process of getting them on our website and having availability. Like, for example, there's some work being done around the education rubric and what that means for a gifted and talented educator, certification paths. So just anything that would be useful for the masses. Okay. Anything else?
Thanks, Alvada.
Yes, stay.
I'll
I,
settle in.
I don't have a question. I just have one comment that, I'm glad to see this. I would, urge the group to look at in the gifted realm. We see a lot of, not a lot, because it is not that common, but to consider some awareness and training around twice exceptional students.
It's huge.
And so, yeah,
So that was discussed heavily, both at the first meeting and then also at the AGTS LA conference. I went to a number of sessions on TUE students, and that is certainly at the forefront of their minds and districts. And it is common, it is common,
it's not commonly known, not that
right?
that's
Or
where we are.
identified,
Mhm.
right? Okay.
Can I just ask one more question?
Yeah, Ashley.
With the educators, I know, I haven't heard anything. Is there a shortage of G&T teachers, across the state?
So they do have to have a master's
Okay.
degree. And so it's more of looking at like who offers the pathway, what support can you get? Like if you're putting them on a OFAT and they have 3 years to get that certification, like what can you do to support them to ensure that they're working towards it? And different stakeholders had ideas about how they handle it in their districts. And then we're also partnering with the educator talent and workforce development team here at the department. We are having conversations with them like around what we can do to support certification and retention of those teachers.
And I wonder too, because I know I've
And-
talked about this before, is can Louisiana create with higher education, Board of Regents, like coming out with both either regular ed and sped or regular ed and gifted and talented? Is there a way to merge that? Because once teachers get into the classroom, then they go on with their lives. Some of them may start to have families. They don't have the time to put in, once they're already a classroom teacher, to then go back for years to try and like earn an add-on certification or a master's, something like that. Is there a way for us to fix this from the front end and offer a pathway for our educators to come out ready to teach regular ed, sped, have a sped certification, and then possibly gifted and talented? Like,
Yeah.
is that an option?
Yeah, Ashley, that's a great flag. We have had recent conversations, actually. When I say recent, earlier this week, just with certification. We also have talked to Dr. Mooney over at LSU.
Okay.
A lot of interest, obviously, and desire expressed, just like you did, around what dual certification could look like, and just making sure, because we know that even an educator who goes into maybe general education, they are going to work with a diverse
Correct.
learner. And so
Yeah.
ensuring that they feel supported, their capacity is built around what it looks like to support those students. So it's definitely in our mind, and we are hoping to continue those conversations to really develop that path forward, because we see the need. So.
Well, I can speak to, a couple of weeks ago, I was actually at Southeastern doing interviews with student teachers that are currently in place, and they are coming out with dual certifications at Southeastern. So it's a gen ed and special education dual certification graduation pathway that they have options for. I know for one at Southeastern. I'm not sure who else does it.
I think Louisiana Tech does, and maybe ULM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's, I think, continuing to be developed across our state, but looking at maybe what we can do from an agency perspective. So,
Okay.
yeah. Any other member discussion? Okay. Do we have any public comments? Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next informational report on our agenda, this is regarding our Louisiana Center for Effective Transitions, or LICET. This is a really exciting project we currently have underway that has been funded by that DIF grant, the Disability Innovation Fund. So at this time, this informational report will be presented by Dr. Jennifer Vigner, who is also a member of our Diverse Learner team.
All right, good morning. I'm going to give you a Disability Innovation Fund update. So following the receipt of the grant in 2023, LDOE Division of Diverse Learners, that's us, in partnership with Louisiana Center for Effective Transition, or LICET, developed a comprehensive transition framework and began piloting implementation in Lincoln, Union, Caldwell, and Catahoula Parish. Those four piloting districts are continuing to build on inclusive practices, which is the foundation for solid transition services, and they are also offering a variety of post-secondary training opportunities to students with disability. So the goal is to improve success in post-secondary opportunities for students with disability. This year, we have some really exciting things happening. So those piloting districts are continuing to develop statewide transition guidance to ensure consistency across our state. While we know every area is different, every system has different resources, we want the framework and guidance to be consistent, even if resources may be different. LICET is also piloting strategies as part of the middle of high school M2HS initiative, which include a comprehensive toolkit and framework to start early planning and support for transition services in middle school. We know 16 is too late to start having these discussions. We need to talk to the middle schoolers and start transition planning. The 5 additional systems that are part of this M2HS initiative are Calcasieu, Grant, Jefferson Davis, KIPP, and NOLA Public Schools. The toolkit will be available in June 2026 statewide, so that's really exciting. LICET has also created pathways for students with significant cognitive disabilities to prepare for meaningful post-secondary opportunities and celebrate the academic accomplishments of students on alternative pathways for high school completion. So there are 4 bundles or pathways depending on what the student's post-secondary goals are. LICET continues its commitment to building better guidance for transition by collaborating with partners, including vocational rehabilitation services, independent living facilities, community college representatives, parents, policymakers, and private sector employers. So exciting things to come. We will also have some panels at Teacher Leader Summit this year to kind of talk about the work that we've been doing. So yeah, stay tuned.
Thanks, Dr. Vigner. To stay in put in case we have any member discussion.
Hello. Hi, Caroline Jurisich. I have a couple of things. So one thing that I'm curious about with the toolkit, I know it's available to the districts. How much is geared toward parent and family education? Having worked in K through 12, higher education, and done a lot of my research on families and transition, I would say that a lot of times they feel a little bit overwhelmed and lost and disengaged from that process. Is there going to be education or toolkits specifically targeted to parents and families, and when is that available to them or will be presented to them? Because I think it really could be important, it really is important to provide before the transition planning happens.
That's huge. And there's a section on
Okay.
family engagement as part of the toolkit.
Great. And then the second point that I'll just put in, having worked at a post-secondary education program for almost 10 years, there now in our state, we have 10 different programs at universities and colleges and community colleges for inclusive post-secondary education. I think that we're starting to see more transition plans identify this as a goal, I would just, again, encourage that there would be strategies that support that goal, because it is different than a technical college. It is different than a, 2-year plan or training type school. So I would encourage the involvement of the higher education programs in the state, and that number continues to grow.
Absolutely, and we've been talking to some of the schools that are offering programs. And we also, in that accountability piece for our students with significant cognitive disabilities, that's one of the pathways. So,
Any other member discussion? Yeah, thank you for addressing that, especially around parent-facing documents. Dr. Vickner's work that she continues to do with this DIF grant is really exciting to us as an agency, because we know there's so many fantastic resources available within our state, but sometimes they work in silo, right? And so the intention here is really to have a hub around transition support, not just for district support, not just for our school leaders, our system leaders, but specific to parent-facing documents. That process, we know, can be very overwhelming. A quick Google search, for example, will give you several hundreds of resources that are available to try to decipher through those, really understand the pathway for a student. It can be difficult. So we appreciate you bringing that up around parent-facing documents. It's certainly a need that we plan to address.
Can I interject for 1 second?
Yeah,
You brought up a
definitely.
good idea. You took the words right out of my mouth in terms of like higher ed, the higher ed connection. And I too am aware of some of those programs, those specialized programs on college campuses and technical campuses, which is amazing for our students with significant cognitive disabilities. One of the things that I've noticed just in my own search as a parent of a senior, y'all pray for me, is that to the point that was made, all districts don't have the same level of knowledge or resources. So I'm really glad to see this. Unfortunately, I feel like it's too late for me as a parent with this rollout being in June, but I am really excited for other families. I think one of the biggest things that I'm hearing from other parents and sort of lack of knowledge from districts is any financial aid opportunities as students are looking to transition to higher ed, and not just, and even if it's available for vocation. So incorporating that, especially in a parent-facing toolkit, is going to be incredible for their transition into post-secondary education.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dejanay.
And I'll kind of comment on that. I think Ashley has something too. That kind of ties in, I think, the importance of the education with LRS and vocational rehab, because they do provide funding a lot of times. It's individual specific. But I would say that what I was the director at UL's program, and what I would say we would often see across the state is LRS themselves, the individual offices, weren't always aware that that was something that they could provide. Now, the state office knew, and then you had some districts that were aware, but there was a lot of education that had to happen from that program side to LRS. So I think it's important, they are so involved in the employment side of transition planning, but making sure that, everyone's on the same page, and this toolkit is really geared toward every party involved at that table.
Yeah. Thank you. Ashley.
The only other thing I was going to add is a lot of times, people have, and especially, individuals that want to go on to post-secondary, there are these great options, but they're capped and they're limited. We've got to ensure that there is some sort of backup plan, and that it's not just solely written around going to one of these post-secondary opportunities. But if that doesn't come through, if they don't make the cut, they don't get in, what is the second option? There needs to be a secondary layer goal or some other pathway in that plan or being discussed. So if they don't get into one of these programs, what do we have as a backup plan? And what does that look like for that individual? Because I know I hear from families all the time, my child didn't get in, he didn't pass the interview or whatever it might be, and this is what they were banking on. And then they come to this dead end. and nothing has occurred, there's no backup plan, and they're starting from scratch the majority of the time. So something around discussion, let's have a couple of things in place in case something doesn't work out. We've got this to fall back on, I think would be helpful for parents.
Absolutely. Karen.
Sorry, I'm
No, this is
ahead of
great
things.
conversation.
This is my area. And thinking about, and I don't know what the long-term plans are for the rollout of this toolkit, but exactly to what Ashley just said, they are capped. There are limitations on what, the number of individuals they can serve. There are a lot of times age limits for those application processes, but that age limit goes to usually 26, 27, 28. So years after they've exited the high school, the K through 12 system. Having available, I don't know if it's a website, if it's a page, what else is out there that may continue. It's not necessarily just what's the backup plan. It's how can we continue to work towards this goal even once K through 12 is done? What service providers are available? What do they offer? What organizations are available in the state? Because they will exit that K through 12 system, at a certain age, but they may still be pursuing that goal of post-secondary education. So I think that having some sort of, when you said the word hub, that's kind of what I envisioned, like what is available after the K through 12 system is, you're done with that and you still want to pursue those those post-secondary educational goals.
A question as well, about just wraparound, not just, I guess, post-secondary as far as work or whatever the case may be, as far as like guardianship responsibilities for our significant cognitive disabilities for those children who may not be able to. And so families are well prepared and like, how do I get guardianship? What about Medicaid and all of those things too? Because those are a lot of things that families face of what to do once our students exit K-12, and how do I continue to support them past that point?
Yeah.
I think it's also important too. I'm the coordinator of the Lions Connected program at Southeastern. And everything that you all are saying is true because I get calls, we cap at 25 years old. And I just had a call, 2 calls actually. And unfortunately, their children has aged out of the post-secondary option. But I think it's also important when you're looking at a transition plan in high school to think about, if their goal is post-secondary, I think that's wonderful. However, they do need a backup plan. And that's where volunteerism comes in, where they can volunteer or have an internship or work toward part-time or full-time work. And that's where LRS would come in, whether that's supported employment, job coaching, or even independently, they can go out and get their own job. But my mantra has been forever, too many students and young adults with intellectual disabilities, once they age out of the K-12 program, they're home and they have nothing to do. And I think a lot of that is changing the mindset of parents and families and starting to plant that seed that their child can achieve outside once they graduate. And whether that's working 1 hour a week at a food bank, it's giving them some kind of purpose, or if they're enrolled in a post-secondary education program. So I think transition's kind of my thing too. This is my passion, and it would have been very helpful if I would have received this information prior to the meeting, because I really want to get into this and look at it. And I would be willing to serve on a work group around this work, around transition. And, my son is 24 years old and he has Down syndrome and he's in post-secondary. He has a job. So these are all things that I'm passionate about. And I have a lot of questions about these documents, but I won't go into it today. But I would think it would be very helpful if we could get these as a panel beforehand so we can really look at them.
Absolutely. Thank you. Y'all see me quickly writing over here. I really appreciate the conversation and the discussion. I see Dr. Vickner back there typing as well, taking notes. A lot of what you're referencing are items that we're trying to address as well through that hub, through that one-stop shop, so to speak, of resources. So certainly appreciate the insight there and the conversation today.
Dr. Wells, I would also like to comment, school districts have to put a lot of work into trying to educate our parents and work with them. Yes, we have many parents that are with it and on board and they know what the next steps are, but we have many that do not. And they know, well, this is my baby, I'm protecting them, we're getting through high school and then we'll figure it out. And sometimes it's very um, taxing when you have to sit and truly have those realistic, difficult conversations with parents, but to allow them to see, yes, your baby can do more. They can go out to work with a job coach. They will be okay if you're not right alongside with them, because our whole goal from K-12 is to create independence for that post-secondary when children exit school, but school districts can use some support around that work, because we do work with the staff that we have and they are very passionate to provide that support and help those parents. But many times we get agency refusal letters just because simply they're afraid of, if you invite someone else to my meeting, what's going to happen to my benefits for my kids? Like, that is realistic.
Right.
So, some work around that in supporting school districts to, assist them
Yeah.
while working into this, please.
Yeah, thank you for that, Alvada. So as Dr. Vickner mentioned, those 4 piloting districts that are the original recipients of the grant, that was what we really heard a lot from around, we need parent-facing documents, but specific to the fear of you're not going to lose benefits, and kind of developing that like a chart almost, or a flow chart of, yes, they can work X amount of hours, can receive X amount of pay, and that is still okay. So really trying to develop that out further, even looking at what we can do for video content. Sometimes we develop some great guidance, but going through some lengthy pages here can be difficult. So trying to advertise that and communicate that in a variety of ways, because we've certainly heard from all of our districts that that's usually the main concern from parents.
I'm just going to put a plug in here for the Parent Engagement Task Force that just wrapped up. We had a lot of conversation, because all roads lead back to families. And so we had a lot of conversations about educating families, supporting families, have family-facing information. So I really hope that all of this gets back to that, and that things are implemented to support districts. Because to your point about it, you only have so much time and capacity at the school level. We need to be able to extend that and dedicate specific family engagement resources into families and schools and districts.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, there was a comment you had made about talking with parents about like age of majority. There was a bill that was passed, I believe it was 2 years ago, that now requires IEP teams to provide information to families whose kids are on the alternate assessment around all of that. And it's also in the new handbook. So all of the options are on there, just even if they're not on the alternate assessment and they get the book and parents read it, it's in there. But there was a law to educate families on that particular subject.
Any other questions or comments from the panel? Public comment. We have Ms. Catherine Hart.
Catherine Hart, parent of a child with a very complex body. And I do want to make sure this grant is also looking not just kids with significant cognitive disabilities, our kids with significant physical disabilities, complex needs. We do need pathways that, LRS doesn't show up to transition meetings. They don't have any options for our kids. I've even seen LRS not show up at the school for the blind for these kids. Jumpstart pathways are not accessible, even for blind students without other disabilities. They're pigeonholed into, I think, hospitality, when other pathways like audio engineer could be made accessible for them. So we need to look at those other options. As I've told in my own IEP team, my greatest fear is not that my son won't survive to 18. It is that my son will survive and live past the age of 21 and be stuck watching his nurse's soap opera for the rest of his life without having a choice of what he wants to do. So we always need to think about what is the role of education. Education is not just preparing students for the workforce or for college, because that's not true for every student. The role of education in all cases is to teach self-determination. So we always need to make sure, keep that at the forefront of our mind for all students, even the most complex, that when they reach 14 and they start having these transition meetings, they're able to make the determination of what they want to do. Not necessarily what their parents want them to do, but they should be taught to make those decisions for themselves.
Thank you, Ms. Hart. We just in response to that, we appreciate you bringing that up around accessibility. And Dr. Vickner has worked with a lot of different stakeholders across the state around conversations of what an employer can look for our students, and making sure that they understand their abilities. Really thinking about AAC, so differing modes of communication, making sure that that guidance is clear around how we can simply communicate differently with these students, and making sure our employers are aware. So I appreciate you bringing up just accessibility as a whole when we think about physically complex needs, and what it means for that student for post-secondary. Ashley?
Are y'all talking with the different employers and businesses around what available like tax credits and like ADA grants, that stuff is available? Because there is a lot out there that people don't even realize they're not tapping into it.
Right.
Around making tons of accessibility. You get so much per year, per individual. There's a lot available to businesses that I don't feel like they know. So is that a part of y'all's discussion, is walking them through, this is what is available if you make these types of, accommodations, modifications to your business, and then how to access the funds in order to cover what the cost of those actual accommodations and modifications actually are?
Yeah, so Ashley, to your point, we're envisioning that kind of hub that we referenced will have a variety of menu options. So parent-facing, of course, is going to be a large one, but also a lot of resources there for what it means as the employer. So to Ms. Catherine's point, really making sure that they understand the different students' capabilities, differing needs, but then also to your point of what else is out there. So really looking at funding as a whole, trying to be specific, because we know sometimes those grants come and go. So just access as a whole, of when we're aware of them, kind of a fluid document, so to speak, with continuous updates of what might be available. But it is on our radar, because we do envision a true employer drop down, a true employer menu of services, almost of what it means to support these students, and the benefits, right? Benefits for those students, but also for that employer. Thank you for that. Is there any additional member discussion? Okay. I have made pages of notes, so just want to say thank you for that great insight. So the next informational report from our agenda, this is IEP guidance and just some best practice. I plan to present this information. Go to our next slide. I apologize, it's a little bit small now that I see it, but you do have this information in your packet as well. So as a department, we plan to develop IEP guidance, best practices, specific to statements for our LEAs. So referencing steps for our LEA whenever an IEP meeting needs to be rescheduled or reconvened. So the statements that you see here on the next two slides really review that process, and trying to develop some clear guidance for those LEAs around rescheduling an IEP. So the first statement here just talks about if that team cannot complete the IEP within that same session. So thinking about time constraints, thinking about members of that IEP team that may need to leave, just discussing when it is permissible to reconvene that meeting. So you can see the bullets here of just what that might be supported under with IDA, with Bulletin 1706, but also the need to develop some very clear guidance on if that meeting does need to be reconvened, what that means for the IEP team. So we have listed here just documenting those reasons for the dismissal of the meeting. So the example here, that meeting was paused to ensure full participation of all team members, also including the documentation around making sure that new date and time is scheduled with all IEP team members before dismissal of the meeting. Wanting to consider those IEP timelines, considering updated notice, also thinking about that same IEP draft. So the intention here, if that same draft is used, we can really avoid stopping and starting of the conversation. Now, unless new data emerges, meaning if we hold an IEP meeting on 1 week, maybe week 2, we have some new progress monitoring data, some new items to review, then of course we want to make sure it's a data-driven decision and current data is included. And then you can see on this next slide here, this is simply a sample statement. Whenever we think about guidance from the department's perspective, what we can do to develop some clear statements for our districts on if a meeting does need to be rescheduled, how we can really manage that extended time of the meeting. So this is simply a sample statement that can be included on an IEP. It states the IEP meeting should be scheduled at a mutually agreed upon time that allows full participation of those required team members. When discussions extend beyond the scheduled time, the meeting may be adjourned and reconvened at the earliest available time, which ensures the IEP is reconvened to meet an IEP timeline. The IEP team will document the reason for adjournment, issue a revised meeting notice, and ensure parents and all required participants have the opportunity to fully participate. Attendance through virtual means or submission of a written input is acceptable under IDA as well as Bulletin 1706 when in-person participation is not possible. So I really wanted to just bring this to you for informational purposes. The conversation we just had around transition, the conversation we've had earlier around gifted and talented work group as well as dyslexia really helps us from an agency perspective to ensure that we are developing documents in a way that's supportive to the field and all stakeholders. So that's the purpose of this as well. Wanted to bring it to you for your attention. You as the district really, I know you've seen this before whenever an IEP meeting needs to be reconvened. We've also received a lot of emails around, what are some next steps? What do we do to ensure maybe a timeline is still met, but to ensure that all voices and all team members have that role with active participation. So that's the purpose of this guidance, really to develop some next steps and just some best practices around what can occur if we need to manage an extended IEP meeting or reschedule. So at this time, I will open it up for any member discussion.
I have a quick question. Is this related to or separate and apart from the last meeting's discussion around the petition for rulemaking? Because we also discussed advocates, and I'm just wondering where that conversation landed. This guidance, I think, is pretty clear and on par with what needs to happen, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, so that petition was actually denied. We don't plan to update any policy or anything like that, but we did hear the needs for some clear guidance around what that could look like. So yeah, we've been needing to develop some clear IEP guidance, and these are just some statements that were brought to our attention based on if there's a need to reschedule, what that could look like.
Okay, thank you for the update.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other comments or questions from the panel? Public comment, Catherine Hart.
Catherine Hart. I'm a parent who has very long IEP meetings. Uh, I just want to stress the mutually agreed upon times. It is more important that the parent be available and participate than it is for the district to meet their timeline. There is judicial precedence on that. And parents are the only one not paid to be at these meetings. So if you're having to have a meeting, reconvene a meeting, it is not, oh, well, parents could not attend by our timeline, so we had it without them. No, you have to do it at the mutually agreed upon time. If the parent is not able to take off work for that time, then you're gonna miss your deadline. Your deadline is separate from the parent's participation, and the parent's participation is more important than that deadline. One thing some of the smaller districts do, they're very good at this, is I believe everybody gets a list of kids whose 60 days that their IEP timeline's coming up. And they start at that 60 days, starting to reach out, work on goals. One of the things that's worked for me is working with my IEP team members ahead of time on the goals, so we don't spend most of the IEP on those goals. For people where I don't have questions because we've worked everything out ahead of time, I will actually ask the district to dismiss them from the IEP meeting. Again, if the district and parent both agree in writing that the person doesn't need to be there, the person doesn't need to be there. Same with reconvening a meeting. If you've already gone over somebody's section, parent and district can agree at the end of that meeting, this person does not need to come back when we reconvene, then you have a smaller team the next time. But that pre-planning, not waiting until, hey, it's the week before you're due, I got to meet within this timeline. Maryland actually has a law that requires districts to give at least 10 business days notice for an IEP meeting. And then they are also required to provide all documentation, charts, evaluations, and a draft that will be used at that meeting that supports all their information 5 business days before the meeting. It's just something to consider, whether it's guidance, whether it's rulemaking. How can we help districts so that they are, and parents, so that we are able to do preparation ahead of time and not have to discuss everything at the meeting?
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Ms. Hart. Appreciate that insight.
I have a comment.
Alvada?
So to speak to some of her comments, she was definitely on point with notification and those types of things. In our district, we have a district policy that annual reviews of IEPs must be completed 30 days before the anniversary date, and we also require them to be complete and in our office. So I always tell my teachers, never use the excuse that a parent made me late, because there's no such thing. If you're planning properly and you are working within the guidelines of the district and properly collaborating with the parents and all service providers of those students, it should work out. And we know that things happen, but it's all about that communication component and working ahead of time, because she's absolutely right. Some providers, we have a hefty caseload on rosters, but it does not eliminate the fact that every child's important. So if you're collaborating appropriately with those service providers and writing a draft in those IEPs and working with the parents, it does work out. So having those time limits before that anniversary date is very important, and I would hope that all districts, if they're not doing it, to consider it, because it makes life so much easier.
Thank you for that, Alvada. Yeah, those best practices are around different districts. Ashley?
Is it possible to add some of that language into here to change up that and add, language around the importance of, what Catherine just talked about, having, prep work done, having as much as you can done, the practice around if we've already covered, this teacher, this teacher, this teacher, like they can be excused. Can that, because I feel like a district that feels like they're doing the right thing may not be doing the right thing. If a parent is perceived to that school as difficult or challenging them in IEP meetings, they may just, I feel like we need to be more specific, and give specific examples around what truly is best practice. While this is great, I also just find it just sort of vague. And there's no real meat to it. So would it be possible for us to give specific examples around, agreeing prior to adjournment that these teachers don't have to come back because their areas have already been discussed? Ensuring that, parental participation, if that parent, again, is difficult and the parent's like, I can't make that date, I can't make that date, I can't make that date for whatever reason, that some districts may go ahead and just reconvene that IEP meeting without that parent. Putting something in there around the parental involvement, just to address some of the concerns. Some of the calls that we get from parents are really around what Catherine was talking about. I love what y'all are doing with the pre-deadlines of those deadlines is smart. It's just best practice. Can that stuff be added into this to send out?
Yeah, absolutely, Ashley. I especially appreciate the specific examples of, if service providers have already discussed prior with the parent, then right, there's no need for everyone to still be at the table. So I think that's really excellent feedback.
I'm wondering if, because I had a technical question about the rollout. I am concerned about getting specific, like drilling down to specific scenarios, because we know there can be a ton of different scenarios. I wholeheartedly agree with the pre-work, because we're not coming to my IUP at the table discussing the things, because we will be there forever and we're not leaving. But there are some timelines in place though too already in the parental rights handbook in terms of getting a draft copy. Like we've been through that. Could what's being discussed be addressed with a technical process to reissue a P&L? Because your P&L is going to have your excusals and your participant list. So I'm just wondering if that could be the guidance sort of wrapped up in one, is that you were issued a P&L for the initial meeting. If you're going to pause and continue the meeting, to me, a P&L will capture who's excused, who needs to be
Right.
at that table.
Yeah. Thank you, Dejanae. Are there any other member discussions? Okay. I think we have additional public comment. Ms. Corley? If you don't mind, just so everyone could hear. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Karonda Corley, and it's so nice to see a lot of y'all faces that I'm actually very familiar with. As you know, I am a proud parent and parent of a child with a disabilities and a disabilities advocate. And unfortunately, the P&L does not reflect the actual people that are normally there at the IEP meeting. For example, I invited Ms. Chastity Hatsfeld and Ms. Roxanne West, who is the special education master for East Baton Rouge Parish School System, to my IEP meeting, and they did not attend. In addition to that, the person that is actually over the special education department, which is Mr. Adam Smith, he was invited too. He didn't attend. Our American Sign Language coordinator was invited. They did not have her attend. So it's a lot of people that are important that are listed on the P&L that are being invited, but they're not actually attending. So our P&L does not reflect what it actually needs to reflect. But also, as we talk about what the IEP is supposed to do and what we're there to address, all of that follows IDEA, which this body is governed to do is the implementation of IDEA. One of the things that is supposed to be covered is transportation, and that is not being addressed. Also, food. My child has a severe food allergy to milk and soy. Nobody from cafeteria staff has been invited. My child has never rode a bus, courtesy of East Baton Rouge Parish School System, and I transported him to school every single day and picked him up until my illegal arrest. And he never received transportation post that. and those individuals never came to the IEP. So there are things, according to IDEA, that are supposed to be covered in the IEP meeting that is not being covered. And when we create agenda items and we say that we're going to actually address issues that are supposed to be covered at the IEP meeting, they don't get addressed, including the parental concern section. My illegal arrest has been listed in our parental concern section for 2 years now. 2 years. I was arrested August 14th, 2023. This is 2025. It has not been addressed. So when I talk about the things that we are supposed to cover according to IDEA and the meaningful participation of a parent, I'm muted every single time. I never get to talk. I've had to pay for multiple attorneys to attend and speak on my behalf. And that's funding that I do not get to be reimbursed for having them to actually speak on behalf of me and my child. And when I say I pay for attorneys, I'm talking about one for my child, one for me, one for my family. So that's 3 attorneys at the table. We have to look at what implementing IDEA really looks like and how it should not be something that is costly for the family. Our school districts receive funding every single day on the backs of our children, especially if they're receiving more than one service. Yet the family is not receiving a free, appropriate public education as IDEA spells it out. So how do we address that? Number one, we need to create an actual chart, a flow chart. If this happens, then we go to this. If this situation exists, this is how we address it. But number two, you need to ensure that every single person that is at the table actually understand what IDEA look like. We have so many districts that are spending thousands and millions of dollars on attorneys that are not educating the staff. You have teachers that are being pulled to the table at the IEP meeting that don't have any knowledge of the child. That's problematic, and that is not what is embodied under IDEA. We need to make sure that if a district is going to bring their attorney to the table, that they actually listen to the advice of their attorney. Sometimes the council actually come and tell them that, hey, what this parent is asking for is not unreasonable, such as ABA in the school. But yet, the school district will choose not to listen. So I think that if we're going to do a grave justice to our families, and I know that our state have over 100,000 children with disabilities that are currently enrolled in the school system, that's not including the ones that are in private parochial schools and the ones that are being homeschooled, we need to really and truly look at how we're gonna make sure that everything, including the new laws that come out, are actually being addressed, including their health, including not having police unnecessarily arrest them and transport them in the back of a car like what happened to my child, including not having retaliation happen to the parents just because you don't like that they have more knowledge than you. So if anybody have any questions, comments, and concerns, I am always able and willing to give you lists and names and many, many suggestions. But I do think that we do owe all of our families of individuals with disabilities this much of help.
Thank you, Ms. Corley.
Thank you.
Do we have any additional public comments? Okay. So our next, you're able to get back into that, Ashley. Thank you so much. There we go. No, that's perfect. Thank you. So our next informational report on that agenda, this is an overview of transition planning. And let's see. Getting close to the end. There we go. Thanks, Ashley. This has been guidance that is developed for our IEP teams. I wanted to present it to you today, especially as Dr. Vicknair really talked about the work with Lisette specific to transition. So this guidance is in your folders, and it's simply for awareness purposes. We wanted to bring this to you as many of you might already be aware of the guidance that's out there, as this is already live on our website. but really specific. So there's 3 different documents here. The first transition guidance really just goes as an overview of components to support, even giving compliance examples, which I think is really helpful for our districts. And then those next 2 documents that are included in your folder and listed here are really specific to both middle and high school. So transition, what it looks like to begin that transition process even sooner than the age of 16, as so many of you mentioned here. And so just some easy to use checklists that have been, again, developed for our IEP teams. Now, keeping in mind, this is separate from that DIF grant that Dr. Vickner mentioned earlier. And when I say separate, we know that we still have a lot of work to do around that grant, around parent-facing documents. But the documents that you have here for you are simply based on guidance for IEP teams for district support. So just wanted to bring them to you for awareness as we continue as an agency to develop guidance, to develop field support. At this time, I will take any member discussion we have just around that transition guidance.
I want to say thank you.
Oh, good.
So, I hold IEP writing workshops for our staff, every other month. And so this was we used this at our first one this year.
That's great.
And just for them to have the guidance and for them to see that we do need to start thinking about it earlier in the 6th grade. And 2 years ago, we started career days for our 7th and 8th graders where they go out into the communities and get to tour businesses. And this year we brought them, the businesses to them at our local community college. But this has helped support that so that our teachers see the importance of it behind the IEP and that it's actually, that we're transitioning them, that we're getting them ready for that independence and the self-determination that was mentioned earlier. I want to share an example too of talking about transition, just to kind of brag on one of our students, but she's a senior this year in Leap Connect. And we found out last year that she was interested in possibly being a CNA. And so this year we were able to get her into the first responders course that is taught at our high school. And the first assessment that was given, she was the only one that passed it.
Wow.
And so we were very excited for her. But, it's just encouraging that the department is now pushing out more information and support for districts. And because our students, they do need it.
Thank you for that, Rebecca. Yeah, Dr. Vickner, I know we're over there. Yeah, very excited to hear that this is being utilized. So certainly appreciate that. Any other member discussion?
I have maybe a question or a statement. I'm not sure which one it is yet. For the 11th grade, begin working on college applications or job readiness portfolio. Does that fall under the teacher expectations for transition planning?
Dr. Vickner, can you help clarify?
Or is that just a general?
So 11th
grade, we want to
begin working on college application or the job readiness portfolio. Is that the item you're referencing?
Yes. Okay, so gotcha. I guess that just kind of goes back to my point, and I probably sound like a broken record. Those inclusive post-secondary education programs, those applications are extensive, sometimes 20 plus pages, 30 pages. I don't know if it can be added or if it can be just, and maybe if this goes to the DIF grant, but we are seeing those completed by families and parents, but not always, there's often difficulties and challenges. So I think maybe if there was, I don't know if it's more explicit language around if that's being done in the school or if that's a discussion in the transition planning, but I just think it's something to note that as far as the higher education side, I did not ever really see applications coming from teachers as the leading the charge on that, but I think parents would have welcomed that assistance and support in doing that.
Yeah, that's a great slide. Thank you for that.
Any other comments from the panel?
angle. Transition, hot topic, because it's important. And I will never use my district's experience as what's, blanketed for what's happening across the state, because I know some really good things are happening. Unfortunately, it's not happening for me in my district as a parent. And so I'm glad to see this, even if this isn't parent facing. Obviously, I'm in education also, so I can interpret it a bit differently. I would have used this to help guide my kids' IEP team in utilizing these steps to advance. Unfortunately, even with the feedback or questions that I ask around transition and those who need to be present at the IEP meeting and what this exit year looks like, there's still a lack of understanding and knowledge at the district, at the school level. So, all roads lead to awareness and training. And so I think there's a great need for that. And to note that hopefully it's not the mindset of all, and I know that it's not, but that transition services is only reserved for students with significant disabilities, and that it's for all students with an IEP, regardless of what their next steps are. Transition services should be a topic that we should be addressing. And I feel like that it's not being addressed because he's just the regular kid, right? And so we need to look at really emphasizing that this transition process is for all students.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dejanay. Ashley?
Just to piggyback off, can we create a parent checklist to put in the section on the department's website around this is what should be happening to sort of guide them, just like we're guiding, districts. I do wish I had days to review all of this. And, it's just a lot. And I think we need sort of what Dr. Reno had talked about earlier. If we can break up into working groups or something, there is such a huge disconnect with transition. And then when you get into those that are on Leap Connect, I feel like the disconnect is even greater. I know I've known you for a long time. Good. I have not seen you forever. It's great to see you. The work that some districts are doing for all of their kids is incredible. But East Baton Rouge Parish is atrocious. Other districts that I'm working with are atrocious. And it's parents don't know what is their role. So I feel like if we could create something for them, just like we're doing for the districts, it would be helpful so they could go in informed, because oftentimes the IEP teams aren't necessarily informed. My son had a certified SPED teacher for 2 years, his entire time he was in school. So they're not even aware, your general ed teachers necessarily aren't aware of what is available, what is supposed to be happening. They're trying to do what they can without the knowledge that a certified special education teacher has. If the SPED director can't come in and assist, or an IEP facilitator isn't there, these conversations just aren't happening the way that they should be happening. So I feel like empowering parents with this information, but on the parent side, go in and ask about this. Have you reached out to LRS? Is pre-ETS an option in your district? I don't see, and I could have just overmissed it, like, is pre-ETS somewhere in here as a possible discussion? Again, I could have missed it. So if it is in here, great. If not, I think it's something that needs to be added, especially if it's available in the district. But I really do feel like we need to empower our parents with information and sort of like a checklist like this, if we can.
I think pre-ETS is kind of embedded under 9th grade self-advocacy and skill development, continue building soft skills and workplace readiness. So that's what pre-ETS would do. So, right. So my question is, or my comment is as well, so this looks really good, but looking not only with the parent component of educating parents about this, but also with districts, because with underneath employment preparation, job readiness, and work-based learning, under the 18 to 22-year-old transition program. So if LRS is not involved in this, what is a district or an LEA or a school supposed to do with that? How are they going to implement that? What does that look like? Because they don't know. Again, I think it looks great on paper, but we need to drill down to what does this look like, and how can a school achieve this for a student?
I'm also going to add one thing, and I had hesitated to say this, but looking at the independent living skills and the daily living community integration, the instruction and practice, one thing that I commonly see is a lack of instruction and knowledge on an individual's own medical history, incorporating that, doctors, and then also we often hear about individuals who have not participated in any type of sexual education during the school years, and that is a huge component when we're looking at safety. So if we're, expecting individuals to live independently, they need to understand that. So I think there could be real value to explicitly stating, especially around that sexual education that is offered at the high school level. And sometimes we hear from parents and individuals a lot that maybe they participated partially or in 9th grade. We know for a lot of the individuals that are transition planning, repetition and continued talking and learning is important in order to retain that knowledge and it really stay with them. So doing it once in 10th grade is not necessarily enough for this population, a part of this population. So I do think that that is, especially when looking at those individuals who are going to higher education and living on college campuses in the dorms, there is a huge component of safety that goes along with that.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other member discussion? Okay, do we have any public comments? We do, okay.
Ms. Corley?
I would like to say kudos to this side of the table for the points that they pointed out, because y'all were right on point. Half of the districts don't know about Louisiana post-secondary inclusive education to even talk about that with our children. Half of them do not know how to actually implement their IEPs and address independent living skills for them. So that's not happening. When we talk about what this body is supposed to do, this body is supposed to advise Bessie, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, in regards to the implementation of IDEA and what that look like, including sanctions, fines, and penalties for these LEAs that are failing our children every single day. Our special education departments in each school system is supposed to do compliance, and that is falling far by the wayside, and nobody is really addressing that. Let me say that again. It don't exist. We have social workers and guidance counselors in the school systems, and yet the only thing they're doing is pushing paper, administering tests. But when I was in school, they used to actually provide guidance. What happened to us? We need to make sure that guidance counselors and social workers go back to doing the job in which they actually are legally bound to be doing. In addition to that, we want to say that we want to put all this on the parents to know. They don't listen to our parents. We want to say that we want this to be that they listen to the teachers. Have y'all talked to Louisiana Association of Educators and Louisiana Federation of Teachers? They not listening to them neither. You need to actually put this on the backs of those superintendents and those school board members that are elected and that have a fiduciary duty and an ethic and moral violation and compass that they are not addressing. See, this is the issue that we need to make sure that we talk about. Louisiana School Board Association and and the Superintendent's Association, that's who this needs to be on the back of. These superintendents, these special education people, they don't know nothing about this website. The teachers don't either. Half of them not even getting their certifications done in time. So when we talk about what is realistically happening for our families, I'm not about to sit here and put this on Miss Melissa Bayham's and them back with LRS. They are not financially equipped with the staff to be able to be in every single school system. I know because I actually reach out to her and talk to her. I know because they have had to address issues that EBR school system failed to do as it relates to our children with disabilities. And it is problematic for me to actually hear that some of these school districts actually could get it right, but the rest of them can't. So if the rest of them can't, why aren't we having them come in here and actually tell us why they can't? So that we can actually realistically come up with a harmonious way to address each and every school system in this state. We're not talking about what's happening in New Orleans Parish. They've been under a federal decree for how many years now? Let's talk about this. Let's realistically address it. But what we have right now ain't nothing but another piece of paper that's being wasted. It's some pretty words on a piece of paper that really is not going to be addressing and helping our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional public comment? Okay. That's okay.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to Melissa? Have y'all been able to fill those slots with the money that y'all got? I know y'all still returned a bunch to the feds because we weren't able to get the full request. I think we got an additional 4 million in state general funds. How has that, has that improved your staff any?
So the challenge that I have with counseling staff has not been funding. I mean, to hire how many counselors I need,
Yeah.
we would get to funding, but we're not even there yet because we continue to have retention problems.
Okay.
So we are hiring counselors, but we're losing counselors. So what we're focused on right now is a special entrance rate with civil service, because I think that entry-level pay for our counselors it's too low. It's 17, 18. And so we can't recruit.
Right.
So until we kind of get that fixed, I mean, we're continuing to hire. But like I said, we're losing as many people as we're hiring. So we're continuously turning over staff. And so that's what we have to fix, if that makes sense.
I know when we met, we had talked about getting rid of the specific degree requirement or that upper level degree. And like other states are having like similar conversations, like is it necessary for,
So that was some misinformation. We don't require a master's degree. We only require a bachelor's degree, which is required by our federal regulations. Now, we do hire at the master's degree level if we have applicants at that level, and we can offer them a little bit higher pay because of their extraordinary qualifications. But you don't have to have a master's degree to be hired as a rehabilitation counselor. And I wasn't hired with a master's
okay,
degree.
so that was just
it's
misinformation out there. Okay. All right, thanks.
All right, thanks everyone. So we'll stick to our last agenda item, and this is the last item for today, which is an additional informational report. So this is an overview of additional guidance. As we had the discussion this morning, we wanted to bring you one of our last documents that has recently been released, and this is specific to support framework for behavior, specific to that early childhood setting. You do have access to these documents in your folder, and I certainly appreciate that feedback around getting you these documents sooner. So that's something we'll certainly address for our January meeting. This document is also live on our website, but again, just wanted to bring it to you for awareness as we are talking this morning so much around guidance. We also know another hot topic, in addition to what we've already discussed around dyslexia, around transition, is always behavior, right? And so this specific guidance, behavior for that early childhood population of students, talks about supports for student if they do have an IEP, supports for students with teachers, support staffs, our system leaders, and then even what is permitted versus what's prohibited around a student for with an IEP. So just again, wanted to bring you this report for awareness. I know some of our districts have already accessed this on our website. We made this public, I believe, last month. And so just something that we hear from the field often about. We know we do have an additional work to do around behavior, but wanted to just share this framework with you specifically for your awareness. So as you're reviewing that document, it is available on the website, but do we have any member discussion specific to this behavior guidance and support framework? Yeah, I'm sorry, Ashley, I didn't see you.
I haven't had time to go through it all, but just, so the first page is for early childhood, is that, or is this whole document?
The entire document.
The entire
specific.
document is for LA4. Okay, the, back to House Bill 684, there was the training that was going to be rolled out, to everybody around, I think it was PBIS or something like that. That was already available or being updated and going to be made available. And then this winter, y'all were going to roll out the crisis intervention additional training. Is that still?
Yep, we are
That's still on track for all of that. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go back to reading before I.
Sure.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, we actually received, or I did, apparently not all districts received the email, but I forwarded it through our Lucia group because they do have the training scheduled with LDOE for CPI, the crisis intervention, in December. So, and each district will get to send two people.
Not all districts, actually.
Oh,
I was in communication with them as well, and it's more or less chosen districts who don't currently have train the trainers in their district.
okay, well, that may need
Yeah.
to be clarified.
It's currently, so
Because that's not what CPI is telling us.
okay, I appreciate that, Rebecca. Yeah, it's currently, that training will be accessible to those districts that do not currently have an individual who's been trained. And then we do plan in the future to look at additional opportunities.
Okay, well, you may
so
want
I
to
see.
contact
Okay.
him today.
I have a comment on that, Dr.
Avada,
Wells.
yeah.
In our last meeting, I do recall posing the question, if a district currently have a vendor that they are using other than CPI, and it is working for the district, we can continue with what we have, correct?
Correct.
So we are not required. This is just something in addition that the state offers.
Correct. Yes.
Now, the de-escalation training is provided to all for
well,
free. It's already on.
You
the
may want to send out an
platform.
email to the special ed directors because the email that was sent to me was that it was two for each
For
district.
all districts.
Yes.
Okay, thank you,
I
Rebecca.
did contact him directly and asked him about that from from CPI, and he clarified. It was just for districts that didn't currently have people already trained.
Well, I talked with him on the phone on the way down this morning, and that's not what he's telling everybody.
Okay, we want to be
Definitely
transparent
some
with our messaging.
miscommunication.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we appreciate
But,
that.
because I tried to explain to him that we already use another vendor, and he said that this was for all districts, so.
Okay, we'll certainly clarify. We appreciate that.
A question around CPI training. So if the district, the charter network in which I work in, we are already CPI trained and we have a person. And so are you providing reimbursement if they are already doing it, if you are sending to people, but if districts are already trained, is there reimbursement?
To my knowledge, not at this time. We do have future discussions, though, to expand different opportunities and things like that. So it's certainly something that we can look at addressing.
Dr. Wells, is this a time limit that districts will be receiving this at
no cost? And
for
then-
CPI. So currently they have established, I believe it's a total of 4 trainings. And so in terms of a time limit, not necessarily, but they only have differing opportunities available throughout the state at those specific day and times that they're offering those trainings.
So just to clarify, are you asking if there's a time limit on having people trained on your staff? Or are you asking if the funding available is going to continue beyond the train the trainer that's initially in place?
Funding available, because that is a big conversation.
Okay.
Sustainability for districts, because CPI versus other vendors, there's a big difference there.
Mhm.
So are districts being made aware, or is there a requirement if they participate and this training with CPI, would that be required, or would they be able to change later to another?
Okay.
That's something I think we definitely should.
Have some clarity around.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I think the train the trainer certification is only good for 3 years, where at 2 years, whereas the actual in-person, the trained person is only 1 year. So every year they have to go through that training again. But the train the trainer, we have to re-up their certification every 2 years. And it's not cheap.
Okay. We'll definitely provide some clarity around that.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Ashley?
One thing that I don't see in this document that I think would be helpful is a reference to Act 745, and putting it in writing that children that were getting into like crisis response and student removal, would they benefit from these outside behavioral health services, whether it's behavioral techs coming in, whether it's licensed clinical social workers coming in and providing some type of assistance during the school day, like a session. I get more calls, probably the majority of my calls are around behavior, and districts still not allowing behavioral techs or BCBAs into the classrooms. The way the language is in the bill is it says it may occur. And so they're using sort of that may as, we don't have to allow it in the classroom. And some districts are being extremely difficult with it. But I don't see it listed in here. And I think it's something that if we can educate teachers, if this is going to get down to the teacher level, that is an option that I think needs to be discussed, because it is discussed in IEP meetings. So is there an opportunity to utilize outside behavioral health services if what they have tried is not working or is not effective?
Okay. Thank you, Ashley. I thought I saw you, Rebecca. Yeah. CPI. So, and I know you said,
As far as, I guess that would be up to the district. So if they have their train the trainers actually implemented and in place in December, if they're following through with that, I know there's multiple sessions that are available, then they can, I guess those districts would decide when they would actually roll that training out to their staff. I don't know, specifically what they're going to do.
yeah, I think that will vary by district, Rebecca. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the panel?
I just want to, Ashley's comment is sparked something that's probably going to open up a can of worms on some things, but I like to spark a fire. If that is an allowable option for some external supports, one of the things that we hear, going back to our dyslexia conversation, is we know that there's not enough trained, there are no trained, if we want to venture into that, therapists in schools to provide the required structured literacy instruction, intervention, there are private practice therapists that can come into school buildings, but they are not welcomed, or it's not even known that that is an option. I was asking Ashley on the side who would pay for BCBS or specialists to come into the school. Obviously, Medicaid is, or private insurance. The unfortunate thing is that dyslexia therapy isn't covered under private insurance. So if we have some language around that for this particular incident, I would just venture to see and explore options for language outside of this document, obviously, for there to be an allowance or guidance or permission for districts to allow any external sort of supplement. That's what schools should be doing, is to extend their capacity using their resources. And that's something that we've been talking about in our profession, about going into pushing into schools. It's easier to go into charter systems because they're going to contract out their supports anyway. But for our traditional public schools who also don't have the capacity could benefit from that.
Is the service you're talking about covered with Medicaid and just not, it's not covered at all?
Not covered at all. It's covered in some states, actually very rarely covered in some states, but it should be under the same umbrella as speech therapy because it's language based, but that's a whole different,
Okay,
ball game to get into.
okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the panel? Public comment, Ms. Corley?
Now, behavior is my favorite one. So we had a task force on student behavior, discipline, and mental health, and we also have a council that's actually right up under LDOE that addresses student behavior and discipline. We actually had Senator Beth Mizell to create legislation that passed where every school district is supposed to actually create a plan before the school year start to address any child that have a mental health or behavior health diagnosis, so that it helps prevent that child from being suspended and expelled. And if that child ends up being suspended, it actually talks about the supports that are supposed to be provided to the families. The problem is, it's not happening. The problem is, our Superintendent's Association, Mr. Mike Falk, wanted that Council on Student Behavior and Discipline to be eradicated, when the number one reason that a lot of teachers and staff are leaving our school systems is behavior health, mental health. We putting too much on the teachers and the support staff back, where we should be putting it on the back of the guidance counselors, the social workers, the nurses, and most importantly, our special education department, because they actually have access to every school in that school system. And they don't do anything. Most of them sit in the office and take a phone call. They don't know the child, but yet they attend the IEP meeting and have so much to say. I'm saying that what we should do when we talk about student behavior and discipline, we're not talking about what it look like if it's a manifestation of their disability. That's not taken into consideration until they have an expulsion hearing. So we need to make sure that in these IEP meetings, we have a realistic conversation about what mental health, what behavior health look like, what the manifestation looks like for that child. I know for my child, when he can't get across to you what he's trying to say because he communicates with American Sign Language and an AT device, when he can't get across to you what he want to say, all of the Bessie board members got to watch him throw things at them to let them know that the Wi-Fi wasn't working in this building. So what I say to you is behavior is always connected to them trying to communicate. Imagine if you couldn't talk and the only thing you could do was throw a pen so that you could get their attention. That's what these kids are doing, and realistically, we're not giving them a real true opportunity to have access, because in our IEP meetings, we're not creating real true communication modalities. And we used to create the plans. It used to be on the LDOE website, but I think that when we created a new website, we got rid of a lot of that information, including the dyslexia stuff. Some of that was addressed too. And if you want that more address, go talk to Senator and Dr. Bill and Laura Cassidy. They'll be more than happy to make sure that the insurance cover that. Any questions and concerns you have, I'm always willing to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corley.
Okay, so I think that concludes the items on our agenda. Next meeting?
Yep, our next meeting is scheduled for January the 28th, so after the holidays. We will now adjourn our meeting right at 11:20.
Dr. Wells,
And just want to, oh, yep,
I'd like to say something, make a comment real quick.
Dr. Reno.
I would like to revisit the high school transition planning checklist at the next meeting, if we could do that, and possibly have some action items or some deeper conversations about what this is going to look like for school districts.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
I definitely agree with that. Some of those timelines are a little concerning, I think, when we're talking about 10th grade, speaking of some of those things, that's too late. So, in my opinion. But one other thing I was going to ask about was the behavior guidance and support for the early childhood. Again, we didn't have time to read through it thoroughly, but I feel like there's some missing language in there. I think it's really great. It's a great document to have, but just for example, the conduct the FBA when behaviors interfere with learning. That's very specific to just learning, whereas social engagement with peers is equally important, especially at that early childhood age, and to their development. So I don't want us to, pigeonhole too much. So I was wondering if there was a possibility to kind of revisit this as well, discuss maybe making some additions. From what I see, there's some great things here, but I do think we could add some language that would be beneficial to teachers. And I think a larger discussion item that I'd like to address is kind of to the point of the parents who spoke. We're giving a lot of information to teachers, and we're making it available to them, which is great. But what do we know about teachers? They are overworked and underpaid. So how are we getting this how are we ensuring that this information gets to them? Is it through trainings? Is it through professional developments? I think that's maybe a larger conversation for this board or this panel to have. And I don't necessarily know how we incorporate that, but
I agree with that. I think that this is the transition information is great, but I just don't want another checklist for them to say done, 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 and they really don't know what to do. So we really need to drill that down, in my opinion.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments about agenda items? Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Yes, Ashley.
A motion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We will see you in January. Appreciate you being here today.